Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your host and your guide along the way. We are midways through a giant project here on the Way of the Showman, where we explore showmanship as an aspect of play. We look at the relations between the two. And we're going now right back to the very origins of us as a species and as us as individuals. Last episode we asked why are we human beings born so helpless, much more helpless than any other animal. The reasons are twofold, and they are connected through the pelvis. So the first thing is that we are a species that walks around on two legs. We are predominantly or completely two-legged. We are the experts of bipedal locomotion, as it's so fancily called. And one of the things that has done is that it has changed the shape of the pelvis. It's narrowing it, particularly in the bottom end of it. And that is, as it turns out, that's also not just, the pelvis is not just for walking, it's also where babies come out. They come out through the pelvis and what we then looked at is that this is that the other feature is our big heads. Human beings are big-headed and walk upright. We're balancing this giant head on top of our body, and inside that head is a brain, and that's the real reason for why it has grown and grown over evolutionary time. From we were called Australopithecines, our deep ancestors. Since then, our brains have quadrupled in size. So giant head combined with the narrowing of the pelvis, it has led us to being born early. It's led to a whole bunch of things, and this is a key aspect of why we are born so helpless. And this helplessness, the survival of the species, of course, being very important for any species. Any ones who did not take the steps to take care of their young in a successful way would then be wiped out by natural selection, by death. So what was the solutions to get past this threshold that could potentially wipe us out as our heads got bigger and pelvis got more narrow? Well, one was the increased social and the tribal participation in the raising of babies, as well as, of course, being born early, and that a huge part of the growth of the head actually happens starting from like 9 or 10 months after conception, which is after birth. So, with that all said, let's jump in to today's episode, where we will be talking about love. And as a starting point, the kind of love that a parent has for their child. And we're going to look at how that impacted on the emergence of play. So I'm going to start with a little quote from a wonderful researcher called Sarah Hardy. And she says, quote, "Whenever parental care evolved, it marked a watershed in the way animals perceived other individuals, with profound implications for the way vertebrate brains were structured." Read that one more time. "Whenever parental care evolved, it marked a watershed in the way animals perceived other individuals, with profound implications for the way vertebrate brains were structured." So, what is she saying? She's saying, there's like a lot of animals, fishes, toads, whatever, frogs, they lay their eggs and then they don't care about their babies anymore after that. But when you do start to take parental care, when you get interested in raising your kids, more of the kids might be, might be raised up to be to stay alive and to procreate, whatever. this is the strategy for how to raise kids and being involved in it. Instead of laying 1,000 eggs and seeing a couple of them grow up, you take a very good care of a few of them. And whenever this has happened, this is all just trying to pass out some of the stuff that is in Sarah Hardy's little quote here, then it marks a watershed in the way that the animals perceived other individuals. And that's what we're going to talk about today. This change of perception of other individuals, the deep interest that we have as a species in other individuals. You might arguably say that human beings are mostly the thing that we are most interested in and fascinated by are human beings. When, as it says in the manifesto, when the showman, what is it that he does? The showman shows man. And Sarah says, with profound implications for the way that vertebrate brains were structured. So that means that not only has it changed our actual behavior, it has actually changed the way that our brains are structured. So we have here a reciprocal relationship, a bootstrapping, ratchet strapping of the brain structure with our behavior and everything. So that was why I started with this quote, and maybe I have now already laid out quite a lot of what we're going to talk about. So let's get started. So in this exploration that we're doing here today, this is going to be a two-parted exploration where we do half this time and half next time, as it turns out I had quite a lot to say about this. So, and we're going to try to get an idea of how play behavior could emerge, and what impact this has had on us as a species. And of course, since we've already said that the play is absolutely, every single mammal plays. So it's not just us that does it, but we are the pinnacle of the players, or the pinnacle player, the very top of the pyramid of players. So we are just one example, but it's clear that this approach, taking care of our kids, which is what mammals do, then we have this. It has a huge impact on us. So to do this exploration, we will look a bit at dogs and primates, but mainly we're aiming to understand our species. And the story that I will present, because that's what all this is, stories. Everything's a story. Big Bang is a story, in the same way that Genesis in the Bible is a story, and the evolution of the whale, which we've spoken about, that's also a story, as well as Herman Melville's Moby Dick. That's also a story, also about a whale. And the history of the world, it's all stories. Things and events unfolding in time in unbelievable complexity, and from all this we pull out patterns and structures. We choose to tell certain things and invariably have to leave out other things. So, in telling the story of how children not just influenced but biologically shaped who we are, and how we are and as a species, I will draw heavily on the work of sociologist Robert Bella's book, Religion in Human Evolution. And it might seem a little bit odd to be using a book that claims to be about religion, but the reason why we're doing that is that his work on the evolution of religion and human evolution, actually it turns out that the thing that everything pivots on in his book is play. So his work on play in this book is like how it's pivotal for the emergence of the phenomenon of religion. And it has been a deep inspiration on me since I first read this book in 2013. So first I thought I'd just talk a little bit about, how do I know this? Have I just read a few books and is drawing particularly from one, or do I have any other credentials? Well, not really, but I am a parent. I became a parent, and as has become apparent, if you've listened to the previous 13 episodes of this exploration of play, I have a tendency to go very deep into things, and thus it was also when I became a father, which was in 2012. The birth did not go exactly as planned. She came 3 weeks early, but then, when it came down to it, she didn't actually come all the way. So in the end, she arrived through a cesarean. This sudden change of plans left me in a situation that I had not imagined myself into. Immediately after our daughter's arrival, I found myself alone in a room with this sweet, vulnerable creature, so little, so soft and endlessly helpless. This had not been part of our birth plan, which you are recommended doing. You created this birth plan of what you want to happen, but of course, nature just happens, and experts around you say, well, we suggest this is the best new route, and all of a sudden we were in uncharted terrain. My wife was downstairs and I was alone upstairs in some room, and I was not I hadn't been prepared for being left alone for almost 2 hours just after she was born. Also, nobody said anything about how long I would be alone in this room. Not alone in this room with our newborn baby. And the last thing that I'd seen of my wife was blood and guts, or it was probably the actual afterbirth, or mother cake, as it's called in Norwegian. So it was a pretty, and it's never nice to see the last thing you see of your wife as you exit the room is that something that looks like some sort of organ is on the outside of her body. But I won't to talk any more about neither organs on the outside of the body or the mother cake. No more comments. So a nurse showed me to a small room with a chair in it, and she gave me a blanket, and then she closed the door behind me, and I took off my t-shirt so that my girl and I were skin to skin. Kangaroo care, they called it, there in the hospital wall in Melbourne, Australia. There was a laminated A4 sheet of paper on the wall, and talked a little bit about the benefits of this, of the kangaroo care. I mean, I knew about this. You don't want to have cloth separating you and your little one. And at that time, I was so overwhelmed, I felt like crying, like it was all just too much. Yet I knew I had to hold back. It was me and her now. Mama wasn't there, and I had no idea what to do, but I knew I had to be there for her. I was the one to hold her and be between her and this spacey, strange world. A strong new emotion sparked inside me. Dad mode came online. Epigenetics kicked in. I mean this quite seriously. I knew I needed to give her the feeling that this cold and echo-filled place that she had just arrived in was good, and it was a safe and welcoming place. That there was someone here whose only task was to be here for whatever was needed for her. And looking down at her, I began humming a sweet Norwegian lullaby over and over again, and the soothing of a human voice, not for technical skill, but for complete and emotional telegraphing of love, care, and comfort. And chances were that she might know my voice, as I had been talking and singing to her while she was still inside the belly. But I was unprepared for this exact scenario. But from the preparation we had done, we had heard that although I imagine that my wife would be here for this, that if you leave the baby on the mother's chest and don't force it onto the tit immediately, but let her come to her senses after the trauma of birth, the crazy situation there, then if you leave the baby there for a while, then at some point the baby will slowly and delicately move herself towards the breast, find a nipple, and begin to drink. She's signaling that she's ready, and if you do this, then chances are that the whole latching on process might be even easier. So sitting there under the blanket, singing and hoping that my wife was okay and alive, this baby, they call it baby-led first breastfeeding. That's, you just let the baby lead you. And this was very far from my mind, as was my wife's breasts. They were far from both of us. So then, as I'm sitting there singing and trying not to cry, all of a sudden, this little sweet creature, she's ready. the next thing comes online in her. Like it's going, okay, we're born. I have gotten some sort of rest here, and now I am getting hungry. So she began to move, and not just a little, but and not just like a jiggle, like she was moving, because of course she was moving all the time a little bit, but she was moving now with intent. Whether, I don't know if it was conscious intent in that kind of way. But this little creature, an hour old, moved with intent as far as I could see. I could see what she was doing, and it was different from just moving for comfort and correction of body posture. Something woke inside her head so heavy, her body so tired after the biggest struggle of her short life. And she slid her head along my chest, and I looked at her, and all of a sudden I realized what it was that was happening. She'd calmed down and now realized that she was hungry, and in the deepest instinctual animalistic awakening, she sprung into her first motivated action. Slowly, with great effort, she pulled herself towards my nipple, which not only had no milk, but there's a 5 millimeter thick, 4 centimeter long plastic stick sticking right through it, like a big no-go / across a sort of parking sign. If I was close to tears from exhaustion and emotional turmoil of being part of one of the absolute wonders of nature, then the birth of a being, which I had a little but rather pleasurable part of creating, then when I saw her, as I saw her inching her way towards the certain disappointment of my male anatomy, then tears began to roll. What a cosmic joke, the male nipple. And under the blanket in the hospital, and it's just about to get even worse, little baby Saskia found a pierced nipple with her hand and eventually realized the futility of her arduous undertaking. Only 1 hour old, and already she has been met with disappointment. To my horror, she placed both of her tiny hands against my chest, and with an even greater effort, she, in a push-up kind of fashion, lifted her head, fighting gravity's pull, and like in slow motion she turned her head from left to right. And I have no idea what's going on. And then she begins, slowly, the same arduous crawl towards the other nipple. And I'd only properly been a dad for about an hour or so, and I already had let her down. Twice. It turns out I was completely useless without my wife. And all I could do was to hold her and to cradle her, showing her that I was there, protecting her even if I couldn't give her what she needed. And we waited. And together we waited for the one who would make our little trinity complete, the mother, Mama. But through the wait, I bonded with my girl, and from the moment she came into our world, from the cutting of the umbilical cord, which I was part of, that I cut it, which is weird, but very soon after that, she was handed to me, and I got to be there for her. And those first few precious moments with her were mine until Mom came, and so effortlessly could provide for her what I couldn't, leaving me standing next to them, determined to play my part, whatever it might be, along the way. During this time of early fatherhood, my ability to love grew into a kind of ferocity that would make me walk in front of a train or step between my daughter and any kind of monster without hesitation, if it could keep her safe. And this new love was overpowering, and for it I am forever grateful, for I do not take it for granted. It is not uncommon for new fathers to feel distant and disconnected from the newborn. For most species of animals, the father plays a peripheral role in their offspring's life, and some never see them at all. Whilst for human beings, the father's role in the rearing and care of their children is an important feature. The love I felt is nature's way of guiding me towards the right kind of behavior. From the love I felt, I immediately got myself into a right relationship with my child. The wisdom of our ancestors were whispering with the power of screams. And I was happy that I got such a strong emotional connection and for such an overpowering sense of purpose. I was needed now in a way that I never had been before, with a depth that made all my previous sense of purpose that I've ever felt, it made it feel quite superficial. So in this time too, it's like I thought I knew what my role was in life, which was to do shows and create that. That's been my whole thing. And then this comes, boom, okay, that's just a job. This is my real undertaking right here with this little child. So anyway, after that little personal detour, let's bring this back to our exploration of play, and more specifically to Robert Bella's book. So I bought this book around the time that my daughter was learning to walk. As I said, I read it in 2013, and my daughter was born in 2012. It was with great pleasure that I found that although I had bought the book to learn more about my dual interest in religion and evolution, I was delighted to discover that for Robert Bella, play was the actual glue or the fertile soil uniting the two, evolution and religion, and actually birthing one of them, religion. So play beautifully afforded a special interpersonal space where religion and indeed all culture could emerge, something which Robert Bella shares with Johan Heutzinger from his book Homo Ludens, where this is also a central idea that human culture emerged out of play, which we agree with here along the way. But anyway, I was beyond thrilled by this elevation of play to such a serious level of importance. Because further, I was pleased to discover how the role, which I so recently had found myself inhabiting, of parent, or the role of parents, in a reciprocal act of creation, afforded the coming into being of a space where play could grow. Hence this idea of this title of that parental love. Parental love made play possible. So when I began the preparation for writing about play as the origin of showmanship, which is this season 4 of this, which you're listening to, the episode 15 of now, and I started to reread all my notes, because I keep a note on my iPhone all the time, and I add to it whenever I find something, and I copy and paste stuff from my library apps and whatever to put in so that I have the information there. But as I started going, then I realized that Robert Bella's book was a big part of his story from his book had actually assimilated into my own way of viewing these topics, thoughts and opinions that I thought were my own, and that I found like, oh yeah, here I see this book agrees. I'm reading a new book about play or whatever, and I see that this agrees with my ideas. But as I realized that a lot of these ideas actually came from, I believe that was the first place I encountered them anyway. So my own idiosyncratic starting point indeed appeared to come in large part from this book, or at the very least be synthesized there in a wonderfully fleshed out form. So this chapter will not even get close to the kind of detail that Robert Bella presents in his deeply researched and annotated book. It has synthesized so much of the available literature on the topic of play that although his main focus is towards religion, the book is an excellent primer on play in human evolution. So if you're interested, Robert Bella's book, Religion in Human Evolution. I highly recommend it. So, as we've already hinted on here, that I said before, the child is a kind of social glue. So let's look at that concept, the child as a social glue. Throughout history, childbirth has been a social undertaking for human beings. Apart from, in extreme cases, a mother is simply not equipped to safely give birth alone. Childbirth has always been a time when mothers and daughters and grandmothers and sisters and even sometimes the men of a tribe has come together. As the child comes into the world, it also comes into the lives of the people around it. Anyone who has a child knows how the newborn brings people together. Even relationships that's long since gone cold can warm up and sprout alive with the invocation of a newborn. Not that I'm saying that anyone who's having a hard time should think of having a child. That's a terrible idea. But the child's helplessness calls upon those parts of us that are most valorous. We hear stories of how incredible sacrifices and strength and courage emerges when called upon for the protection of children. This is not something that we need to learn. It lies in us, latent like kindling ready to ignite. It certainly did in me when my daughter was born, and I also noticed how my relationship deepened with my own parents now that I had a child. Not because I had a child, but because there was a child present. I mean, it's also because I had a child, but because there was a child present. The child changed the dynamic and became like a glue that tied us together, tied me together with my family, and just in general, children are glue that ties human beings together. I think that we actually sit around a child like we sit around a fire, in a circle, watching the slowly unfolding of a person. Every fire is the same. Every fire is also unique, and each dancing flame is like every other dancing flame, yet each dance is completely new and never seen under the sun or inside the cave before. In super slow motion, the child dances the dance of the flame. Each child is like any other human child in their needs and general behaviors, yet each child and its dance of behaviors are new and endlessly precious and valuable. As we sit around the child like we sit around a fire, together with our backs against the dark and the dangers, only ever turning around if the dark and danger draws threateningly nearer. And then we turn around and then we defend our childlike fire. We turn our backs against the child and face outwards together, making a fortification between the precious and the dark, making a cell membrane around our mitochondrial energy fire in our midst. So in this picture of us sitting around a fire, we also find all the human traits in the things that we talk about around the fire, the things we do when the dark gathers us together, the things that matters, the stories that we tell about the world, ourselves, and the myriad of ways that they connect. The stories of ancestors, of heroes, of gods, spirits, clan secrets, songs, dance, wonder, excitement, and magic. All this is shared around the fire. What is most important is shared amongst the adults and passed on to the young, so that they too can see the many ways and the depths of our connections to each other and the world. And I think that when we sit around a fire in the dark, there are other stories being told than when you're out and about and in the daylight. There's particular stories that are told there when we sit around a fire. There are particular stories that are being told when we sit around children and when there are children present. Anyway, in this way we can say that the fact that humans have the longest childhood has shaped human society drastically. The need for the whole tribe to participate in keeping the children alive influenced us over such a long time, longer than we have been humans. As it turns out, it's not easy to keep a child alive. Throughout their childhood, they eat more than a mother can reliably be expected to find whilst carrying her baby. Chimpanzees and all apes have fur, which allows the mother ape at least some use of a hand, as the infants can cling to their fur. Human babies cannot cling to their mother, and without the technology such as a sling or a baby carrier, as it's often called amongst us hipsters, then the baby would have to be put down to free up the hands. In short, a mother needs help. In fact, it feels kind of strange to me that this is even something that I have to write. I don't have to write anything, but it's like, of course the mother needs help. But that's not quite rightly expressed either, because it's not that the mother needs help. It is I And I am always, it is that I am also responsible for the child. Child rearing is a shared responsibility. I understand this is not the case for many men, or even in some cases even mothers, but the ancestral whispers in me became so loud that they were drowning out all kinds of other impulses that I had thought central to my identity up until our child was born. The whispers, as loud as shouting, tells me that the baby is me, more me than me in a sense, and that the mother is also me, that us three are we. I do what I have to feed them, before myself if need be. And in the process, I feel better, more connected, and more useful than I have ever felt before. The child brings us three together, a holy trinity. Possibly the first holy trinity, I don't know. Children strengthen the bonds and feelings across the board, not just between mother and child, father and child, but between parents, grandparents and child, as well as grandparents and parents, let alone all the feelings and bonds that crisscrossed anyone in the tribe involved in the child's sphere, a sphere which is different and necessary. So there's just links going up between human beings and all that. Like if we keep these primordial ideas of us in the cave and everything, then it's the connections and responsibilities for these children. It just connects, relations in every direction. So as we've seen so far, play is something other than everyday life, as we've talked about when we talked about the dog or whatever. It's like now we're playing or now we're not playing, and kids and everyone can knows pretty well to delineate between those things. So when I play with Teddy in the forest, his invitation to play bow, that I talked about, this is a signal that what's true in everyday life is not true anymore. The play bow is the start, and after a period of yapping and running and pushing and the PlayStation finish and everyday reality with everyday rules and the meaning of behaviors returning to normal. The special situation of play is removed from the meanings and rules and pressures that fill our day-to-day needs. When engaged in play, we're not concerned with where the next meal is coming from. The normal vigilance for predators is relaxed, if it's not completely neglected. It's interesting to note that in children's games of chase and cops and like in games of chase or cops of robbers, it's always most desirable to be chased. In many games, the punishment for being the first caught is to have to be the chaser in the next game. Play is a different state of being where what happens no longer means the same or have the same aims as in everyday life. Social status, hierarchy, stress, and all the other kinds of concerns are put aside, and we find a little bubble of altered reality, a place where different rules apply. When humans play, they are in that particular space where their activities do not seem to be necessary or useful. Remember criteria 2, it's apparently purposeless, So everyone is completely committed to the rules, but if for any reason the game changes, then the rules changes with it. And from then on, they are completely committed to these new amended rules. Play is a sphere of being where a woman's beard might not be real, but we love to believe the lie, as an old carnival song describes it. Robert Bella and others calls this zone where play happens a relaxed field. To some scholars, this relaxed field is included on the list of characteristics necessary for play, so it would be one of these one of the criteria that we've spoken about. I didn't include that there, but we're going to talk about it now. So a relaxed field does not necessarily mean a place where you can relax. A relaxed field can also be quite raucous and even dangerous. In fact, as we've touched on before, a bit of danger A building site instead of a playground with rubber flooring can be a very inviting place for play. The relaxation referred to is the relaxation of the pressures of evolution. And in the everyday world, we are all subject to Darwinian pressures of survival, much of which is captured by the famous 4 Fs: foraging, fighting, fleeing, and fornicating. Or sometimes that last F is expressed by another cruder term for the same, also starting with F. Our modern human world demands more of us than what's covered by the 4 Fs, but they still capture a large portion. A major difference between the so-called real world and the relaxed field is that all these 4 Fs, the 4 persistent pressures of needing to forage, needing to fight, need to flee, and need to fornicate, that these all lets up and allows more subtle forces to come into play, pun intended. And in reading one of the essays in Max Maven, the late and great magician and thinker, he describes these two things as these two domains in a way that I'm just adding this here now, and that is that he talks about one is the domain of the things that we have to do, and those are the 4 Fs: foraging, fighting, fleeing, fornicating, finding shelter, and all the stuff that you have to do. These are the stuff that if you don't do that, if you haven't got that sorted in your life, you're going to starve, or you're going to whatever. You're not going to survive. But then once you have done those, it's like we step into another dimension, and those other things that we would like to do, that we can choose not to do, but that we do anyway. So it's the things we have to do, and then the other things that we choose to do. That's 2 different domains. And perhaps here we are now moving into that field as we're starting to look at love and the relaxed field, which we will do next episode. Then this might be the distinction that we're after. And I think that human culture and all of these things, of course it covers the ways to gather food and the ways to make shelter and like architecture or whatever, but the key things that we are interested in as show folks are the things that we choose to do, because very little of what we present on the stage is something that we have to do. Very rarely do you watch a showman just eat a lot of potatoes. Although apparently, now that I'm thinking of that, maybe that example is, I think I read in one of the biographies I read about Andy Kaufman that he might have done that, just sat down and ate a bowl of potatoes. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it is highly unusual. Coming on stage, just brushing your teeth, not common, but it's probably been done. I believe, actually, at Trent Henry Birdman, my friend here that we will get to hear on this podcast in not too long, that he might have done a routine where he actually brushed his teeth on stage. Anyway, enough about that. So that ends this today's main scheduled event, our regularly scheduled programming. All right, fellow travelers, there we go. At the end of part 1 of Love as the Origin of Play. And I just thought I'd make another call if there's any of you that got t-shirts and you have some awesome picture of you out and about in the world, perhaps engaging in the craft of showmanship, perhaps being on a holiday somewhere, and then it would be awesome if you could tag The Way of the Showman. If you put it on social media, or maybe you could share it to me in a message or something. That would be totally awesome, and I'd love to post some pictures of that on the account. It makes me immensely proud to see my wife's design and people out there sporting The Way of the Showman, shamelessly having it on their chest. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say here for today. Well, the only thing that's left to say is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.